Hello, everyone. This is Caleb with Texas Quality Assurance and co-host of Quality Matters with Kyle Chambers. And Kyle asked me to just kind of put out maybe like a midweek snippet type deal, maybe 15 minutes, just to kind of, add some additional content and that kind of thing. Which, to be honest, when he sent me that request, I was like, "Dadgummit, Kyle." I'm sure Kyle has mentioned multiple times that we're both fairly introverted. I mean, as far as like, neither of us like to talk about ourselves, and neither of us, like to blabber on. But I do understand the value because both of us have had some great experiences, and we would like to share and help those out, who might be just joining quality or software in my case, that kind of thing. I when I was a new quality manager or getting into quality, I just remember wishing that there was some resource, free resource. There's all kinds of resources that you pay for. Free resource where I could say, okay, well, I see these standards and, I'm reading this stuff, but none of this makes sense to me. Like, what does a real quality management system look like? And I feel like that's something that we definitely provide. We have all kinds of free documents, and Kyle is always the first to say, like, hey, I'll talk to anybody on the phone. Granted, there's some, once we start doing certain things, it's going to cost you some money, but, we're always wanting to be very helpful, with helping people out and getting questions answered, that kind of thing, just because we've been there. So, yeah. So today I think what I want to talk about is becoming a certified welding inspector. And like I started doing another recording, and it's like, well, let me tell you a little bit about myself. And I started going down the CWI rabbit hole, and it's actually a very complex process. A lot of these guys, they become welders, you go to welding school and you say, okay, well, now what? I think a lot of guys, they recognize pretty quickly that they don't necessarily want to be, laying down on a shop floor or trapped in a tight crawl space, into their 60s. So I think a lot of people look pretty quickly and they start trying to think to themselves, okay, well, now that I'm a welder, what do I want to do moving forward, or where can I go from here? And one of the things that I did, which, it is what it is. But I think looking back, I would have liked to have had more actual welding experience. I went to welding school, I got a 2-year welding degree. And I started looking for jobs, and I did a little bit of welding, and then I became an inspector very quickly. I moved to Houston, and somebody approached me and they were like, hey, how would you feel about being a welding inspector? I think I even submitted an application as a welder, and they're like, hey, well, what about an inspector? So I was like, well, in welding school, they do teach you, what a good weld looks like, what a good weld is comprised of. Sure, I'll give it a shot. So I started that job, and I completely went in not knowing what to expect pay wise, and they took advantage of that. But that moved up pretty quickly, and that's what I tell my sons. Like, going to work is, you'll have to excuse this puppy back here. But it's like going to community college. Like, you show up to class every time, you're gonna get a C. It's like if you show up to work every day, you're gonna you're gonna excel. But anyway, so I started becoming an inspector, and I did that for a while, and then it became, apparent pretty quickly, like, hey, what do I want to do? There's NDT, there's certifications you can get. Like, where do I want to go from here? I don't want to be just some sort of, floor inspector, that kind of thing for the, I can't do that the rest of your life. Just like I'm saying with the welders, like, nobody wants to be trapped in a crawl space, or, having the welder burn your eyes out for the rest of your life. So, yeah, so I just want to kind of share my experience with that. So I was fortunate enough to, be under somebody that valued training and education, that kind of thing. The company that I worked for, and the quality manager that I worked for, offered to send me to get that certification. So definitely the first thing that you want to do, and granted, this has all been 10 years ago, 11, 12 years ago. I would say go ahead and get signed up with the prep course that you're going to take if you're going to take one, which I highly recommend. Start going on their website, whichever one you're going to do, see when their next course is near you. Go to AWS, see when their test is that's near that course or near you. If you have to travel for one or the other, it's kind of whatever. But once you get signed up with that prep course, then you can actually, it's kind of like a resource. Like, I'm not saying inundate these people with questions, but if you call Real Educational and say, hey, I've done this, like, I have a question about signing up for the AWS. Can you help me with that? That kind of thing. Like that, like I said, it actually acts as a resource for you, and they're very helpful. So what'll happen is, and I highly recommend doing the prep course, and then taking the test within a month, no longer than a month. I would say within a week if you can, because you'll just lose all that information that you get at the prep course. I think I did mine a full weekend or a full week after. Some guys were doing it like in class on a Friday, take the test on a Saturday kind of thing, which is, it's not bad. You might want to give yourself a little bit of a break to kind of, if you struggled with some things to get that ironed out, maybe a week. But anyway, it's going to be hard. Like there's no way around it. And I tell people that, well, let me go back. So once you sign up, they'll give you all of your prep material. Like Real Educational, they'll send you, they've got their own booklet that they use, and they've got, all this training material, and they'll tell you what you need to do. Like, hey, you need to come to class with this filled out, with this practice test done. That it's very, very laid out how they do it, and they're very good at explaining that kind of thing. So I would recommend probably, I don't know, 3 months, 2 months, something, however disciplined you are. Like, I think I gave myself 3 months before the actual prep course and before the quiz or before the test. And I think I studied for a good 2 hours every night. And just, whatever you feel like you're not familiar with from, the educational material, just kind of hit that stuff. But you'll go over everything in the prep course. But just kind of try to fill in where you don't have experience. Like if you're not a TIG welder, learn about TIG welding. If you're not an NDT person, learn about NDT symbols and learn about NDT stuff. And all that curriculum will be given to you once you sign up for those things. So another thing I tell people is reading comprehension was the thing that helped me out the most. I've always been a pretty good reader, been able to I have good comprehension, but not everybody's like that. So I think, if you do struggle with reading or reading comprehension, I mean, the only thing you really can do is practice. So start, reading definitely a lot more, try and get pretty quick at it, try and stop yourself while you're reading and quiz yourself over what you just read, or, go back to a paragraph and say, oh, did I catch that? Because that's a lot of what being an inspector is, having that standard or that code with you, and then being able, when there's any questions, being able to find that information. But you've also got to be accurate doing it. So for example, in like AWS, they could be talking about procedure qualification versus an actual welder qualification and have two different requirements. So if you're looking at qualifying a welder, but you're in the procedure section, like there's going to be different requirements. So just stuff like that. And the AWS will try and trip you up. Like, they'll make a question where they'll say, hey, turn to this section, and according to this, and then you really have to read that question in order to determine whether or not they're talking about a welder qualification or a procedure qualification. But yeah, just reading comprehension. One thing I tell people with taking the code portion of the test is read the whole question before you even start to answer it. And this is all stuff like Gerald and Linda go over. They teach you how to take that test, and you'll take that practice test, which is pretty much like their test, multiple times. They don't give you the exact answers. I will tell you that. You're not going to go in there. Like whenever I took the course, I was like, are they just going to give me like all the answers? Is somebody, has somebody written all these down? And then you just memorize them. But the question is like the problem not the problem. Like, it's good that it's like this, but the bank is massive of questions that they use. So you never know what you're gonna get. There's no way to memorize them all, and it's not even the same stuff. Like, you have to know the material, especially the practical stuff, and especially the general stuff. Like, the general portion is massive, and they cover everything from safety to ultrasound testing, and like, you have to know this stuff. I mean, because I think you got to get a 70 all around. I think I got like a 93, which I tell people, like, coming out of that test, like, I don't even know what I was gonna get. My wife asked me, like, how'd you do? And you're like, I legit don't know. I think I did well, but man, it's crazy. So definitely prepare. Definitely, like, don't take it lightly. Don't spend all that money just to be like, oh yeah, well, I think I'll study for 2 hours before the prep course. And I think that there's probably guys out there that could do like no extra studying and just take the prep course and probably maybe get a 70%, but you'd be cutting it close. Like, there's no reason not to be studying all the way up until you get to that prep course. So the way Gerald and Linda does it, and I think they do it fully online now, which I don't understand quite how, because like for the practical portion, back in the day, it was 3 parts. You had your code part, you had your general part, and then you had your practical part. So like the code part is like whatever code you chose. Then they ask you specific questions about the code book. So say API 1104, AWSD 1.1. They ask you specific questions like, in this section, here's the scenario. What do you do? So you have to be able to like go to that specific section, because you only have a certain number of time, or a certain amount of time. So you've got to be familiar with that code book. And when you do like a prep course, Gerald and Linda, like, they'll tell you exactly where to put the tabs to, and what to mark, because they're very familiar. They've got a lot of input of what's on the test. So yeah, and then there's the practical portion, which is hands-on. Again, they'll show you how to do all that stuff. You actually measure welds, and then you look at this fake specification that they give you, and you say, okay, is this weld, rejectable, or, and one of the things that I remember is they like to try, and it seemed like it to me, they like to try to get you to say something is rejected or not to code when it is. Because, it's easy for any inspector to say something that's rejected, but you really don't start becoming like a more advanced inspector until you start saying, okay, well, this is why that's acceptable. And that'll make sense to some people, but like, once you start really learning the codes and really learning, like, you'll know what the spirit of the code is, and what's acceptable. So I think that's something they try and trick you up on, is like, oh, well, this weld size is this. Well, the obvious answer is that it's 1/16 too small. However, there's a footnote that said for, this specific type of weld, you actually get one, 30 seconds or something like that. So it's actually acceptable, but you didn't read the footnote. Anyway, I'm sure I'm scaring everybody, but it is a hard test. And you do have to read every question before you answer it. I recommend not necessarily like, I don't know. Yeah, for the code, because it's broken up into 3 parts. You'll take one part, you'll take a break, you'll take another part, you'll take a break. Like, I recommend reading through all the questions before you even start, and that just gets your mind going, just gets you to understand, kind of gets the jitters out of like answering the first question, and like it'll give to you like an overall picture of the test. So once you pass the test, you'll get your results. I think it took, I don't know, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. And at Real Educational used to do this thing where if you get above a 90%, they'll give you a free course, which that's how I got my film interpretation certificate, because I got a 90, like I said, I got 92, 93. But once you get your results back, you'll get your card and all that stuff. Then you got to start learning, okay, when do I need to renew my that's kind of confusing in its own self. I think it's like every 2 years you have to submit for renewal, and then every 4 years you have to do like prove some sort of additional education or something like that. It's going off the top of my head, but yeah, so once you get that, you'll get your card. Then you can start making the big bucks. No, I'm just kidding. But some people have that as a requirement for getting an inspector position. And some people have that as a requirement that shouldn't have that as a requirement. But it definitely opens up quite a few doors. If you're a welder, you definitely have a leg up. And I think I started to talk about it earlier. It's like, I really wish I could have had more experience as a welder. But you know, we only get so much time in life, and here I am, a software developer now. So, so yeah, I would have had to taken that time from somewhere. Um, but yeah, it's doable. You know, I've had a couple of people, and there's all kinds of resources. You know, everybody's got PDFs floating around with study material, and I'm pretty sure Real Educational's old stuff is even in PDF form. There's threads and all that stuff, and I'm pretty sure some of what I've said about the actual test itself may be a little dated. I think they changed the code portion a little bit, but it's definitely doable. It's definitely hard though, and I would highly recommend taking a prep course and taking it very quickly, or you know, within a short time span of when you're going to take the test. But it's definitely worth it. It definitely pays off, and what it really does is kind of gives you an idea of the industry as a whole. You know, you kind of get an understanding of like weld procedures and, like I said, safety, and you know, just NDT and all the stuff that you may have never been involved with now. And then that kind of gives you some ideas of like, okay, well, where do I want to specialize in? Like, you know, after I got my CWI, I started doing ultrasonic testing, and that was something I really enjoyed. So it, you know, lets you kind of know if you're in a single shop, or you've only ever worked, you know, one or two places, or only ever do one or two processes, like it kind of gives you an idea of what else is out there. So, yeah, if, you know, you guys have any questions about that, or just, you know, quality consultation in general, you know, maybe you're an inspector currently, but you're starting to get tasked with some additional procedure writing, or, you know, maybe somebody's wanting to get you ISO, or wanting you to get ISO certified. We are that resource. You know, we are a business. We do charge for things. However, like Kyle's always says, is like, we'll always pick up the phone. We're always going to give you some advice, and we're always going to get you, you know, started on the right track. So again, this is Caleb. This is the, I guess, midweek quality snippet. So yeah, let me know what you think.